morning, good evening, and good afternoon. I hope you guys been having a fantastic week. I know I have, and it has been a beautiful week in Virginia. I gotta say, this Saturday, I actually went to the International Food Festival in Lynchburg and actually had a very good gyro. I was very surprised. I didn't think there was any good Greek food in Lynchburg, but you know what? Life proves you wrong. But anyway, for this week's episode, we have a fantastic guest with us. This person has been a part of the audio drama world for years now, and it is an honor and a pleasure to have this person on my podcast, and the fact that he has granted me an interview with him is just fantastic. So please introduce yourself, tell us your name, and the show or shows that you are a part of.
Hello. It's really great to be here. And after that introduction, I hope I don't disappoint anybody. But I'm Mark Anzalone, and I'm one of the co-founders and the lead writer at Maeltopia, New World of Horror. And I've written, The Shepherd of Wolves, The Red Mother, The Damnation Machine, The Sleep-Wake Cycle, and a whole bunch of short stories and whatnot. And I'm trying to think if there's anything beyond that. Well, just a whole lot of shorts on the channel, actually, and I've designed and done most of the lore for the other two remaining shows, which would be Obscuary and Grimland.
Oh, nice. I didn't know you worked on those shows.
Yeah, I did the... I designed them from a lore perspective, and I designed the characters. My brother just kind of takes it and does his own thing with them, but in terms of just kind of designing them, putting them together, and getting them aligned with the Maeltopian lore and whatnot, I kind of do all that. And I'm also the artist. I'm the lead artist for the audio show. When you get into our Instagram, you'll see tons of images and things like that. That's all me.
So what you're telling me is when J.R.R. Martin needs help with his Game of Thrones, you'll be ready with all types of new lore for him.
If he ever gives me a call, that will definitely be. I'm up for whatever he wants to do. I can do that. We can hang out and have a gyro like you'd mentioned earlier. I'd be up for anything. A man like that calls, you answer.
Oh yeah, well hopefully he's calling somebody, because I'm ready for the next book.
Oh yeah, he's been dragging his feet on that, I hear.
But anyway, I digress. If we're going to be talking about that next book, we can be here for hours. But anyway, so what made you get into the world of audio dramas?
Well, it all started with Facebook, actually.
Really?
A friend of mine, I didn't even know what podcasting was aside from just, I knew there were like science podcasts where people would get on and discuss various topics that they were educated in and things like that, or news podcasts, but I had no idea there were audio dramas out there. So when it started, I was writing a short story called The Shepherd of Wolves, which later on the whole series itself was predicated on. But I had no intentions of doing anything with it. I was just talking with a friend of mine who was trying to get me to get on social media. At the time, I didn't even have a Facebook account, and we had gotten into this weird argument about why I didn't want to, because there wasn't really, my life really wasn't interesting enough. And I said, I'd probably fake being a serial killer or something and give updates as to my victims or something goofy like that. And then from that conversation and wanting to do something with the short stories I've written, my brother was like, why don't you kind of combine them? You could do like a Facebook post, and we could post the story and then, as an update or something like that, and then just kind of go from there. And I was like, who knows? Maybe it'll go somewhere. And we did. And
so
what's that?
No, I'll continue. My apologies.
Oh, no. And then it just kind of, we posted it, and he had kind of gone around and talked to a bunch of people about, he was getting into the marketing end of it. And all of a sudden we had people following us, and it was very surreal for me. And it just kind of took off as a Facebook thing. And then later on, when I was made aware of what a podcast was, we were like, oh, well, this is probably where this kind of thing belongs. And then we just kind of moved it over there.
That's amazing. So do you remember the first audio drama you ever listened to?
My brother had given me, as you're going to find out, my brother is like the guy in front of all this. He's like supplying with me everything that I needed to know before we started. But he had sent me some stuff just to give me an idea as to what we were getting into. And I want to say the first podcast that I listened to was something like, I think it was Unwell. And then I got into the Magnus archives, and after that, there was just a slew of them I started to listen to, just to kind of get a sense of what was out there and what was going on. Because like I said, at that time, I had no idea what a podcast was, at least in the audio drama sense. So I just kind of dove in and listened to as much as I could, got into it. And, we just said, well, this is seemingly where we would belong. And I think we started off with Podbean, and that's where we first kind of migrated to. And then we were off to the races after that.
Nice. I remember the first time I got introduced to the audio drama world. You're probably going to laugh. So I actually got introduced through I Love Lucy.
Oh.
So I was messing around with, my mom loves I Love Lucy, so does my grandmother. So they have the DVD collection. So I was messing around with the settings, and I noticed there was like a 30-minute show on there that wasn't I Love Lucy. So when I clicked on it, it was actually like an old radio show with Lucy Ball on there. And it was just amazing hearing the noises, listening to the story, and it was basically like I was visualizing everything that was happening. So after that, I was like, what the heck are these radio shows? And that basically made me jump into listening to all the ones. You mentioned one I did listen to, Unwell. There was also Old Gods of Appalachia. What's another one? We're Alive. And there was just so many. It was just amazing to see these people just create their own worlds without any visuals.
Oh, yeah.
Everything through audio and everything else.
Yeah, it's remarkable how many shows were out there at the time, and I got into them, and I was like, man, the detail on these and the lore and just everything was so new to me, and it was so impressive. And it was kind of intimidating when we first got into it, because we were jumping into the water with these types of shows, and we were like, I don't know where we're going to land, but it's got to be far below these guys, because man, they're polished. And it was. Yeah, it took us a while to kind of get our bearings as to what we wanted to do and what direction we wanted to go in. But those shows really kind of operated as like, the lighthouse in the distance, what direction we should at least try to go in, and, what we would have to kind of navigate to get there. And so they were really instrumental in terms of just giving us a sense of what we were trying to do and how to accomplish it. And, a lot of podcasting, as you know, is just trying to get not just the writing across, but, equally as important is the audio quality and the music and so on. And these guys were doing it to the nines. And so we really had our work cut out for us as to what we had to do to rise to the level of some of these other shows so that we could kind of fit into that little niche, which has grown considerably. When we started out, it kind of reminded me of the Wild West. Everybody was kind of doing their thing, and there wasn't really too much organization. And as the years have progressed, that's kind of cohered to something a little bit more structured. And we were just lucky to kind of get in the beginning, so that by the time things did look all, a little bit more polished and organized, we already had a little bit of standing in the area.
That's amazing. So when it came to Maeltopia, so was this like the first series you created, or were there other shows before? Because I know you mentioned the Wolf one, and it's under the Maeltopia umbrella. Was there something before that, like a startup or like some type of protege?
Well, Maeltopia is kind of like the umbrella term. It's just the name of the world. The Shepherd of Wolves was actually our very first audio series. And Maeltopia is more or less like the name of the world itself, where everything is kind of integrated. Everything's based on the central event, the Great Darkness of 1999. And that's kind of, the epicenter, the nucleus, the primary dynamic for the entire show of Maeltopia. So kind of everything revolves around that, with the very first show being the Shepherd of Wolves. But as far as any preceding stuff is concerned, I mean, not really. I mean, we'd done some publishing in short stories. We had some stuff getting stories that my brother and I had written show up in small press and things like that we were kind of working on. But nothing audio oriented, nothing like that. In fact, I didn't even know it was something anybody did. I mean, I knew that there were theater productions and things like that. I can remember some old Call of Cthulhu shows that were out at the time, and downloading them and listening to them. But they were more or less like radio theater productions. But beyond that, I really had no idea what was going on. So by the time we got around to it, the Shepherd of Wolves was really the first and the foremost of all the stuff that came after, and kind of set the tone for where we were going in theme. But if you listen to it, you can definitely tell it was our first outing. We really didn't know what we were doing. Some of the episodes were like 5 minutes long, and then the next one would be 20 minutes, and then another one would be an hour long. We really didn't know what we were doing. We were just kind of posting as much as we could, and just kind of watching everyone else to kind of get our cues as to how to go about things.
No, that's definitely understandable. I remember when I was first posting my show, it was a lot of trial and error. And for the first part of like, I think 20 episodes, I didn't realize that if you listen with headphones to my show, only the left side of your headphones will actually have the voice, and it wasn't at stereo. And like I said, I didn't realize until like 20 episodes later. So, and I was just trying to post as much as possible.
Oh no, I know that feeling.
Yeah. So speaking of trial and error, did you have a lot of trial and error when creating your show, especially since it's Maeltopia is like the world itself, or did you already have like a solid idea of what you wanted the show to be?
Well, going back to the writing that I'd referenced before, like the short story writing was something I was really into. I love to write, and before that, I was an avid role player. I played all kinds of role playing games. We made some of our own, and there were we always made our own worlds, and so within the confines and context of those worlds are all these stories and things like that. And then some of them I turned into actual short stories and whatnot. So there was really a real strong foundation for Maeltopia going into things. And, I kind of had a blueprint in terms of the stories that I wanted to write. But as we went along, I kind of decided that it would be best to just kind of, while it wasn't bad to draw from that pool of experience in those previous stories, I wanted to kind of go in different directions. So while there was a lot that I imported from my previous writing days and, role playing and things like that, I decided that we'd kind of start fresh and do some different stories, but yet again, situated in the same overall world. So it was a pretty comfortable transition. We had the foundation laid. There's an actual physics for the world itself. So when I articulate certain phenomena in the world, I've got a very good way of kind of figuring out where they go and how they function and how people interact with that. And so it was pretty comfortable on that level.
Oh, that's good. So basically what you're saying is if Netflix or Amazon contacts you, you have like the foundation to make Maeltopia into like an animated or live action show.
Oh yeah. If I survive the phone call, I may have a heart attack and just kind of fall out of my chair. But if I survived, absolutely, I would have. We've got a lot of material. One of the things that we try to emphasize is that the lore, and there's just lots of it. And so if something like that ever, man, that would be great if something like that did happen. Yeah, we would definitely have the material for it.
Oh, yeah. So I understand that you mentioned that your brother got you involved with podcasting, bring you into the audio drama world. Was he always into audio dramas, or was that something that recently happened and he just wanted to introduce you to the magical world?
I think it was kind of like in our quest to try to figure out what we wanted to do with what, we were writing and things like that. He was more of the explorer. He went out and was looking at things to try to figure out, what was out there, what we could engage, where we could peddle our wares, so to speak. And so it was him that brought me, kicking and screaming in some cases, not only into the audio world, but like social media, things like that. Because I'm an older dude. I'm probably one of the older guys in the game. I'm 51. So this was kind of new to me. I really didn't know much about what this stuff was. And he's not all that much younger than me. I think he was in his 40s at the time. So he kind of introduced it to me, and then together we kind of explored it, but on the technical end of things and kind of understanding the ins and outs of the marketing and whatnot. He was definitely the guy that was in charge of all that. And then shortly thereafter, we met up with the third member of the Maeltopians, which was Walker. He's our principal editor, and he unfortunately was just as clueless as we were when it came to things like that.
So basically the Three Musketeers went out and you basically conquered the audio drama world.
Well, I don't know if we conquered it, but, we engaged it. we tried our best. And, we've been really grateful for the success that we've had. Like I said, for three kind of introverted guys that knew very little about what we were getting into and practically no technical expertise whatsoever, we did manage to pull something off, I think, that would, if you had told us about this beforehand, like you're going to go on to make a podcast that's, fairly successful, I would be like, that's ridiculous. We can't, we can barely operate our computers, let alone get involved in something like that. So it was surprising that, we managed to do what we did and that we're still going and that we're, we've got an incredible fan base, and it's been an incredible ride all around, and nothing that's happened thus far was anything I would have expected to have taken place given the kinds of limitations that we had.
That's awesome. And I'm really happy for your success and
Well, thank you.
that you guys have more to give to all your fans out there. So when it comes to the process, how does the process work for your podcast, especially since your stories are interconnected within the same world? Like, do you have a storyboard already set up and some crossovers between some story arcs between different shows within the same world? Or do you just go as it and you think, oh, maybe this will work if this character comes into this story?
It's kind of a combination of, well, I mean, both my brother and I are the writers. Walker has been writing one series, actually. He's been writing the, I told you previously, I can't remember things, even the names of our own podcasts. He's been writing one of our podcasts on Patreon. And so all of the lore, like I said, I've designed all the lore and whatnot. So whenever we need to cross over some of the stories, we just kind of get together and plot things out as a group. But, you know, if the three of us aren't getting together, it's usually just my brother and I coordinating via phone. But, you know, I write voluminously. I've got so much in terms of notes and things like that. So for me, it's just like he'll tell me what he wants to do, and I'll just look up the corresponding place or event or name, and I see how it integrates with some other story or the characters that he's looking to kind of expand on, and we just kind of put it all together and off we go. And like I said, throughout the process, like if we're on the final day of writing or something like that, we'll just kind of jump on a phone call and just kind of smooth everything out so that we know where everybody is and how everything's going to function and where it's going to go in terms of the story itself. So that's, you know, it's not a polished process, but it's a known process. I mean, we're used to it at this point. It's kind of, you know, it's not, like I said, polished. It's honed enough that we can kind of get by and with plenty of time to spare before we usually post anything. And that's not to say we haven't made mistakes. You know, we've had to go back and fix some continuity issues and things like that from time to time, just because, you know, there's a lot of plates spinning when you've got that many shows going. And on our Patreon, we have other shows that we write that are Patreon specific, and they too are integrated with the mythology. So they've got to be coordinated as well. And, you know, it's more than just, you know, nodding to the other shows. They're all integrated in a very deep way. They're all, there is one kind of like a meta plot that organizes all the shows that we haven't, that's been starting to emerge now after so many years, that people are starting to get a sense of how these things are working together and how, you know, the storyline is cohering, and not just within one show, but how it's putting together all of the various plots of all the shows. And that does take a little effort just because there are so many shows at this point with more on the way.
Gotcha. So that's amazing how the process has changed from the beginning to your show to now to, like you said, not polished, but something that you're all familiar with, so everything just goes on smoothly. Yeah,
the first show, The Shepherd of Wolves, we didn't have any real design on a literary world at that point. I mean, it was taking place in the storyverse we had created previously, but we really didn't have an idea as to where it was going to go. So of all of the shows, that one, while it is canon, it's kind of sketchy canon because it was written with no real intention to be connected to anything. And then when we decided to start doing more shows, with that interconnectivity being a kind of, you know, an extra feature to what was going on at the time, then we really kind of had to wrap our heads around how we were going to write these things because, you know, like I said before, we weren't really thinking about that initially. But as we went on, we were like, all right, we've got to figure out a process to kind of get everything hooked into the same narrative and get all these subplots off the ground and get them to be intelligible and have them make sense in terms of the mythology and whatnot and how these stories were articulating. And it was definitely at the beginning, especially, it was, you know, we were hitting the ground running, but we were doing all right. But like I said, it took us some time, and we're still kind of developing it as we go.
So what keeps you passionate about the medium, especially since I think you have already over 200 episodes posted?
You know, it's just, I'm a big fan of horror. And, you know, one of the things that we like to emphasize, especially within the sleep-wake cycle podcast, is neurodivergence. And that was a big issue for us when we went into it because we kind of realized it was kind of an underrepresented demographic. And my brother and I both have Tourette's obsessive-compulsive disorder and schizoaffective disorder. And I think, you know, one of the things that sets us apart a little bit is just we have a lot of ideas, and we just cannot stop doing these things. We've been writing, whether we had any designs on publishing or we didn't. It was just something we did. And, a lot of that comes from, I believe, some of the dynamics involved in the kinds of conditions that we have. And so the passion is really built in. We really don't have things like writer's block or anything like that. We really just have an abundance of ideas and are just looking for places to schlep our wares, so to speak. And it's really just something we love doing. I mean, we were doing this, professionally, or we were still just doing it privately, it would be something that would, have a commanding presence in our lives. We've always been doing stuff like this.
That's amazing. And that's super happy to hear that you have so much more to give your audience, and that you're probably not going to run out of storylines. And speaking of storylines, so what were some of the cool inspirations for some of the ones you've done on your show so far?
Most of the stuff comes from, oddly enough, my dream journals. I have very vivid dreams, and a lot of my stories were based on dreams. And so when the new series were coming out, and I said, I'd like to disconnect them from some of the stuff we've already done and try to start new. It was really just me diving into some of my dream journals and some of my free roam kind of, not free roam, but free association kind of word plays and things like that I'd written down in various notebooks, and just kind of mining all that out for the stuff that I thought would work for a show. And, it's like I said, I think, in large part because of the kinds of things that we have, it's just, we really don't run out of ideas, and we've just got so many. It was just a matter of kind of picking what we thought would be appropriate going forward, and, just kind of optimizing the stuff we had and just putting it out there.
That's awesome. So what has been your favorite episode of any of the series so far?
Man, that's a hard one. I got to think about that one. I would have to, I think the end episode of The Damnation Machine was one of my favorites. There was a lot going on in that episode, and it was kind of a daunting episode to put together because so much was going to happen in that episode, and it had to be closed down just so to make sure it was satisfying for the listeners, that they'd gone through this long ride with us. It had to conclude in a very satisfying and meaningful way. And I think I managed to do that. I finally had gotten to a version of the script that I was like, okay, this kind of hits all the nails that need to be struck to secure this into people's memories and to make it a satisfying journey. So we ended on a really good note, and I think that kind of stands out to me as an accomplishment and one of my favorite episodes. There's a lot of episodes from a lot of different shows that I can recall really enjoying, but that one probably had a lot of special meaning to me just because it was so difficult, and it was very, I was a little bit intimidated by this one because the show is extraordinarily long. I mean, it ran for, I don't even know how many episodes, but it was long running, and there was just so much going on, and to end that with so many moving parts in a way that was satisfying was just a massive challenge for me, and I was very, very nervous going into it. So when it finally came off and we got really positive feedback from the fan base, we were like, oh, okay, I did it. And so, I was elated.
So it was basically your Avengers Endgame per se.
Yes, very much like that. It was just so many characters that we had. It was our first new podcast after the closure of The Shepherd of Wolves. Was just one character. The Shepherd of Wolves was just the family man. It was a single narrative, and it wasn't terribly difficult to bring that one to a conclusion. And this one was the exact opposite. There were bunches of characters and lots of subplots and villains, and just had everything. And I don't know, at some point in the middle, I was like, what have I done? I've got so much material. How can I ever hope to close this and satisfy everybody with regards to the ending? So it was just a Herculean effort for me, and just a huge achievement to just pull that show off and to close it in a respectable way that the fans really enjoyed it, and just a sense of satisfaction. And I was dreading it. The walk up to that episode was harrowing. I didn't know if I could do it.
So how many different versions of the script did you write to get the ending right?
Oh man, there was probably, I think I had 10 different endings written up, and that I would kind of modify as I went along. Every day I would come up with a different idea. I'm like, okay, well, I'll try this one and see if that makes sense of things. And I initially I was going to kind of do the ending in a bunch of different parts and like address all the characters separately. But I thought, you know what, that might be too much. I was kind of reminded of the end of the Tolkien trilogy, where it just wouldn't end. It was just one scene after the next after the closure of the movie that it just didn't seem to know how to end itself. And I was thinking maybe that's something I shouldn't try to do by addressing every little character individually. Try to find ways to kind of bring them all together. Not that I'm in any way, shape, or form suggesting I'm better at this than Tolkien or the people that made the movie. I'm just saying that I think that ending kind of went on for a while. It dragged on, and I was like, that I don't think I can do that or want to do that. So I was like, I'm going to try and just do it all in one episode. And it worked, and I was enormously happy. And the fans were really satisfied, and we really didn't get too much negative feedback at all, except that they wanted a season 2, which is on the way. But having done that, it was a sense of accomplishment. Like I said before, the previous podcast was very small. Well, I wouldn't say small, but it was narrower in scope and much easier to deal with as something that you wanted to bring to a satisfying conclusion, whereas Damnation Machine was just all over the place.
Yeah, no, and I definitely get it, wanting to end it in the perfect way. I mean, and there's nothing wrong about saying about Tolkien. I mean, I remember reading Return of the King, and after watching the movie, and then when we got to the Battle of the Shire and everything with the whole weed operation, I was like, okay, this has definitely turned into a different thing. And it just kept going on and on. I was like, I was like, this feels like it doesn't belong, which I was grateful that the movie didn't go that route. So I definitely understand your point of view when you're saying it just went on and on. Yeah,
I think there's a temptation. Yet again, I'm not trying to compare myself to the guys that are doing this in front of the world, up on the world stage. But I think there's, if I have any relationship to the other people in this field, I think there's a temptation to try to give as much finalizing treatment to the characters as you can, so that you can make it satisfying. But I think that there's a point where it's too much, and it's just going to drag on, and you kind of have to settle on something that may not give everybody a full slice of the time that you think they need, but just enough to kind of get their plate across and to close their character arc and to kind of close things down in a meaningful, satisfying way. And that's, not easy. And, just doing a podcast, I can get that sense of the scale and the scope of the problem. And I was just lucky enough to manage to pull it off.
That's awesome. Now, I know you mentioned your favorite episode of all the series you worked on so far, but what has been your favorite show to work on so far?
That's a tough one. I really enjoyed writing The Shepherd of Wolves, which is kind of funny because the one that I really enjoyed writing the most is the most divisive. People have a lot of mixed feelings about that first one that I wrote. And I was kind of trying to combine two genres that probably didn't or shouldn't have been combined. And I think that made it a little bit difficult to get across, especially as like my freshman series. I'd never done that before, never done anything like this before. So it might have been a little bit too much for me, but I really enjoyed writing it. And I think while it was raw in a lot of ways and overdeveloped in a lot of ways, it was very satisfying. I really enjoyed writing it. So I'd say that even though my other projects were probably, objectively in terms of development and execution better, I think I really enjoyed writing The Shepherd of Wolves the most. Just because I think I didn't have a sense of limitations or anything when I wrote that. I didn't know how anybody would take it. I didn't have any sense of feedback on a larger scale. It was just me writing what I liked and experimenting with a lot of things. And I think that there was just a lot in there that I really enjoyed. I thought that if just subjectively for me, it was a fun series to write, and I really got into it. And so I'd probably say The Shepherd of Wolves.
That's awesome. And I mean, saying it was your first one too, I mean, understandable. It's basically the baby that started it all, essentially.
Yeah. It was, like I said, I didn't even know what kind of feedback I'd get because we hadn't really heard too much from anyone. Like I said, when we started it, it was a Facebook project. And, we were really surprised to see the kinds of people that were following us. We had like a small publishing company, some fairly well-known authors. So I was real nervous about it, but nobody had really chimed in. Nobody was really saying much. They were just watching us. And so I didn't know what they were interested in, how they were interpreting it. I just knew they were there. And I was just kind of doing the best I could given what I was setting out to accomplish. Like I said, I was taking a chance because I was combining two genres. I was, a very big Thomas Ligotti fan. He's like a surrealist, weird fiction writer. And then I was trying to put it together with like a Robert Howard-ish kind of prose with lots of combat and things like that. And they don't really have much to do with each other at all in terms of how they're put together as two writers. They don't really overlap very much. But as someone who loved them both, I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to see if I can combine them and see what happens when I do that and see if anybody likes it. And I didn't really have any signposts or anything. Nobody was really saying too much. And like I said, it was just me trying to write something I was interested in. And as a result, I think I came away with more fulfillment from that.
Yeah, I mean, from the success for your show, it looks like combining those two different styles definitely worked out in your favor. And I mean, who knows? Maybe you'll be able to combine other styles together to make some interesting storylines and something different that you've done so far. But do you plan on making any new audio dramas in the future that's different from the world of Maeltopia or set within a different world?
Yeah, actually, we have a show coming out. I don't know if I can give the name, but we do have a show coming out. It's completely independent, and it's different from Maeltopia in so much that Maeltopia it's horror oriented, but it also combines a lot of dark fantasy. There's even an element of swords and sorcery, things like that. There's an emphasis on physicality, combat, wars, and these types of things. In addition to the horror vibes that we try to kind of envelop everything within, and this is not that. This is just pure horror. It's something more, on the level of like The Exorcist or something like that. It's just pure horror. There's not any, none of the characters have anything beyond just normal human attributes or anything like, you'd see in some of the other series. So it is just all by itself, not connected to Maeltopia at all in any way. And just kind of its own thing, trying to do its own thing, just pure horror. And that will be out soon, actually.
That's awesome. Did you guys make your own music for that one, or did you hire a band?
My brother puts together all the music, all the sound effects, all the editing. That's all him. And I don't know who he goes through. I know we have subscriptions with a lot of different places that we draw down a lot of different music from, and he also designed some of the music himself. So it's going to be like the other shows in the sense that, he's always shooting for a very rich sound quality and music assortments and things like that. So it'll definitely have that. And we have some of the episodes of this particular show on our Patreon, so you can definitely get a sense of it there. But it's really trying to do something a little different. In addition to the fact that we have so many shows, I think it's important to have shows that you don't need to have, a homework assignment for. Like a lot of times we have to remind listeners, if they're just listening to, say, for instance, the sleep-wake cycle, that this is integrated with the other shows. So there may be some drama built up around some names that you'll encounter in the show. Somebody will show up and you may not get a sense of the gravity because you haven't encountered them in another show. Which is both a kind of curse and a blessing. It's great to have that interconnectivity so that people can see how it threads through the wider narrative. But it's also a pain because people may not like the other series. They may just want to listen to this one series and they don't want to have to backtrack and listen to some other series just to get, the appropriate sense of what's going on in the series they are interested in. So this kind of is a solution to that, is just some standalones that don't require any homework. You can just start at the beginning, hit play, and you don't need to do any catch up with any other shows or anything like that.
Gotcha. And I know that you've mentioned that this new show that, of course, you haven't named yet, is going to be pure horror, and Maeltopia is like fantasy horror. Is there any genre that like you want to get into but haven't got into that's different than the one you're currently in?
Actually, there's like I don't know, quite a few, but definitely a few. I have a science background, and I always wanted to do something like a science podcast, just where I kind of sat around and just talk various science topics and things like that. I'm also interested in have a background that's weirdly integrated with like a paranormal. We used to do work for a lady around my area who was writing all these books on haunted locations. We did some interviews. We interviewed the people that had stories for her to put into her book, and we just did some paid lectures and whatnot at universities based on some of the research we were doing into the science behind the paranormal while we were working on this other project for these interviews. And it's just a topic that I love. It's near and dear to my heart. I would love to do a podcast on like the paranormal, where it intersects with like real science and so on and so forth. And just some of the stories that we've accrued over the years having done that kind of thing.
That's awesome. And I mean, I definitely would be interested learning about the science, because I remember when they opened up a ghost store and they actually were talking about some of the technology that they use. And I didn't realize how much of a science there was, especially with the different equipment that they used and everything else. It's just amazing.
Yeah, there really is just a huge amount of stuff, to just put it bluntly, I guess, that's going on in that field. Also, too, when you take into consideration that there were a lot of academic projects involved with some of these organizations. Specifically, there were, I want to say one was from was Pear Labs. I can't remember what university they were with, but there were two real well-accredited formal scientific attempts to kind of break down the paranormal that were within larger, famous universities that were given, real scientific credibility as they were going into trying to decipher how consciousness interacts with, when you get into quantum mechanics, there's always this question of if consciousness interrelates itself with, how nature unfolds, if there's this weird relationship between consciousness and the laws of physics. And Pear Labs, and I can't remember the name of the other one, did a lot of peer-reviewed literature that was dealing with real hardcore science as to how these things might go on, how they happen, why they might happen, what the causal features of them might look like, in terms of, trying to map all of this stuff on to existing physical models that we would recognize from traditional scientific circles. And there was a lot of interesting stuff that came out of there. And then on the research end, you've got people that are coming at the strange and unusual with a lot of different kinds of technology, which have now been kind of streamlined to look for very specific metrics in a particular area that they might be looking around in. So it really has come far in that regard. But I've always been interested in the underlying science of it, like what, if anything, could be underlying these events, and what would they look like if you were to try to map them out and put them on or fix them to some kind of a scientific model and make some kind of objective sense of them, what that would look like. And ultimately, I think it would be boring for people, so I'm not really sure it would go over well. But it is something I was interested. We've talked about it here and there about doing something like that. In fact, we did have a podcast a long time ago that never went anywhere, where we kind of went into this. It never got published. It never went anywhere. I think we banked like 7 or 8 episodes of it, but it never went anywhere. Ultimately, I think because when we looked at it, it was like, this is kind of boring. I don't know if anybody would be really all that interested in this.
I think it's interesting. I mean, the fact that you know so much about it and you're able to explain it in a way that's kind of interesting, explain the science behind it. I think if you were to do it again, that it would be successful, especially since you now have, when you first made that podcast, was it before Maeltopia or after Maeltopia?
It was well before. I should have brought that up when you asked me about previous audio journeys we'd gone on, but that one never went anywhere. So it was just kind of, we went to great lengths to develop it. We rented out a small area that we used as a studio. We brought up a bunch of people on board to kind of discuss the ins and outs of what we were trying to get into. And like I said, we were trying to stay away from like ghost stories and just get into a case study, case by case study of what was happening and how what we were doing mapped onto the various features of the paranormal. And really what we were looking to do was find commonalities between all the cases and across the theaters of the paranormal, like, not just within, connections, not just within a haunting, but what are we seeing in terms of repeat occurrences or similar processes within, say, a haunting as it compares to, say, an alien abduction, as to, say, a cryptozoological experience somebody had, and just kind of connect those dots and see after we were all done doing that, if there was something coherent there, if there was an actual pattern underlying these weird things across all the paranormal categories. And it was fun to do, but the question really became, would this be fun to listen to? And I think ultimately at the end of it, we were like, maybe not. So it got mothballed. I think it's still out there in someone's computer. One of the guys that we were working with probably still has a copy of it somewhere. But in the end, we were just like, it's not really doing what other paranormal themed I don't want to call it, enterprises are attempting to accomplish, which is to really entertain with stories. We were really just trying to talk about the science of it, and I just didn't know how viable that would be.
Well, if you ever decide to bring it back, let me know. I'll be one of your first listeners, because it definitely seems like it'd be fun and interesting to me. And like I said, you never know. Maybe you'll be able to capture that audience you were wanting to capture all those years ago when you first made the show.
Well, thank you. I would definitely. I would love to do something like that. And I don't know. There very well could be an audience out there. I'd really like to give it a shot again. I have to get the guys back in shipshape again, so we could all talk about it and sit down and see what we could come up with. But it is something that I've really had a passion for, and it shows up a lot in the podcast because the physics. There's actually a physics in Maeltopia that I use to organize like all the powers and if you get into the mysticism and whatnot and the occult, really behind all of that is a kind of science it's a fictional science, obviously, but it's one that I use a lot in terms of just behind the scenes organizing how things work. And so it's just kind of fun. There'd be people that are interested in the science end of it, and they'll talk to us about what they think of it. And it's just something I like to add just to give it a little bit more association with things that I'm personally passionate about, and it served us well. It's an additional dimension to the fictional world that I think is fairly novel.
Well, if your brother disagrees, maybe it'll be your turn to drag him kicking and screaming.
That's very true.
So I know
that is very true.
So I know you mentioned before when you were talking about characters in your show Maeltopia that some people wouldn't know like the depth of them because they were listening to one story and didn't want to go back to another story. But between all the characters you've created through Maeltopia, is there like a favorite character you've created?
I couldn't list any one, but I could definitely say that, like I said before with the Shepherd of Wolves, Donald, the main character, is definitely a character that, because it was a single narrative, a single point of view, I probably wrote him more than anyone else since. So I really, definitely lean a little bit on him. But I don't know. I say that, but I've also written 3 seasons of the Sleep-Wake cycle, and there's 2 characters there. So I don't know. And then, of course, I think it would probably be a cross between Donald from the Shepherd of Wolves. I loved writing Eric Cromwell from The Damnation Machine. And I also really enjoy writing Rosemary and Isaiah. I don't know. I guess I couldn't give a straight answer.
Hey, that's fine. It's good to have multiple favorite characters if you create it. That means you're enjoying it. And then whenever you have your favorite characters interact, you just get all giddy about it.
Oh, yeah. That's the fun part. That's, especially seeing the fan response when we bring some of the shows together and they get to see their favorite characters interact with each other. And that's always a joy for us, too, just because, it is this big interconnected world. And the whole purpose of that is to see things interrelate. And sometimes the characters, you don't think about them, even though it is, billed as an interconnected universe. And you're kind of advised to think about things in that collective sense. Still, when you're thinking about just a particular character in a particular series, you generally kind of have an insulated concept of them. You don't really imagine them interacting with characters from another show. So when it happens, there's just something enjoyable about that, I think.
That's awesome. So I know you mentioned before that your brother does a lot of the editing, and he also is a writer on the show, and you are usually the writer. But in your opinion, what do you think is harder, writing the show or editing it? Especially since you have, like you stated before, so much lore to go around with the writing as well.
I think they're kind of like almost apples and oranges in a lot of respects, just because, well, I know my brother certainly gets irritated with me, so there's probably more agitation on his part because he does write too, and he's doing all the editing. And what'll happen sometimes is we'll do an early release on Patreon, and because we don't write ahead of time. We write in the moment. I'm writing as I go. So when he posts it for the first time on Patreon, sometimes it's the first time I've listened to it. So I'll listen to it and I'm like, can we change this and that? And da, 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 da. And he'd be like, yeah, I can do that. So we'll have to go back and make changes. And so I think from his perspective, it's probably more agitating from the editing standpoint than the writing point. I mean, he does have to, we'll have chats and whatnot about the work that he's writing, the stories that he's developing in terms of kind of lining it up with the lore, but there's very little like, getting anything wrong. I mean, like having to do anything over again. It's usually just a slight adjustment in the writing, whereas the editing, I'll like ask for complete parts to be changed or something like that. And then he'll have to go back and redo the whole thing. And he gets like mad as heck at me. Like, well, why, I did it for this reason. I thought you'd want that. I'm like, it just doesn't sound right. Could we possibly? He's like, yeah, hold on. And he'll come back like an hour later. How does this sound? And I'll be like, could we just change this one thing? He's like, I just spent 2 hours doing this. I'm like, I know, but could we just change this one thing? And so I'd have to say in terms of just the emotional response or the emotional sense of writing versus editing, I think it's far more aggravating on the editing side, especially when you're dealing with somebody like me who I can't really contribute meaningfully to the editing process or the sound design process or anything like that. So it's just me asking him to make changes. And I have no concept of how difficult they are other than I can gauge it based on his response. Like, are you kidding me? I can't change that. I got to do this. And I'm like, yeah, but can't we possibly? He's like, yeah. Okay. So I've definitely ticked him off a lot. So I would have to say that editing, at the very least, it's just as complex, I would imagine, but probably more aggravating.
Gotcha. And I'm happy to know that even though he gets frustrated, he's still there and is still willing to go above and beyond and make the magic happen.
Oh, yeah. He's always, I think he really enjoys it. There was a time when he was just making the music all on his own. We were just buying just sounds and things like that. And he was orchestrating it on his own, just making the songs and everything. And then it wasn't until later on when we started getting into like licensing music and things like that, our process changed a bit because it didn't require him to work so long and hard on making the sonic backdrops to everything. But he was really quite good at it too. I mean, we've actually gotten to the point where we were like giving the patrons kind of like soundtracks and things to some of the earlier episodes because he really has a talent for it.
That's awesome to hear. So I know you, besides of course your brother and Walker, what are some of the other people you've had the pleasure of working with within the world of audio dramas?
There were quite a few people that I never thought I'd get to work with, especially having heard their work. I think we first started with a network of Rusty Quill, or maybe just after, I can't remember correctly. But Cole Weavers, he's the writer for The Town Whispers. He got together with us and wanted to do like a Halloween project. And they had heard that I had done a lot of gaming and whatnot, so he wanted to do like a role-playing session with a lot of the members. And I didn't know I didn't know who a lot of the people were by name, and it wasn't until we started playing that I knew who some of them were, and I got really nervous because these are some really big names in the horror podcasting space. I was playing with Alex Newell. He's the Rusty Quill founder, and then there was, I mentioned Cole, and then there was John Ware. I believe he wrote Hyman Askew and the Silverses, Muna Hussein? I can't remember. I don't know if I'm pronouncing their name properly. But they're involved with the Silverses. And of course I said Cole, and I can't remember. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. But in that particular session, I was playing with a lot of the bigwigs and didn't know it at the time. It wasn't until later on that I was told, oh, these guys are related to these shows. I'm like, oh, geez. So I was suitably stunned after that. And then later on, I had the pleasure of working with David Cummings, who of course is the No Sleep writer, owner. And so it's been an interesting ride, getting to know all the big names in the podcasting space and having the absolute pleasure of working with them. And like I said, we're with the Rusty Quill network now, and there are just so many podcasts and so many people that are involved in that. And we've gotten to know quite a few of them, and just fantastic people, just really absolutely wonderful people to work with, and it's just been a great ride. We really don't have, there hasn't been too many problems along the line, just lots of really great people, a lot of great opportunities, a lot of work, but it's definitely been enjoyable.
That's amazing. And I'm super happy to hear that you guys are with Rusty Quill. From what I hear, they are a fantastic company, and from a lot of the shows that they produce, they definitely produce quality shows.
Oh yeah. We've been with them for a while, and I just don't have enough good things to say about them. I mean, they've been great to us, and they kind of plucked us from obscurity and put us on the map, in many respects. So we have just an enormous amount of gratitude for the opportunity they gave us, because like I said, it was kind of the Wild West for a while. Everybody was kind of trying to find a way to distinguish themselves, and they noticed us, and they asked us if we wanted to join, and we were just absolutely over the moon about the possibility. I don't know what position he has anymore. He's had a couple, but I can't even remember. His name is Callum, and he kind of organized the whole thing for us. I mean, from start to finish, he was the force behind all the things that happened, and he was the one that kind of Doherty is his last name, I believe. Just really made the whole thing plausible for us, and was just such an advocate for us. So we have just an enormous amount of respect and gratitude for him. But everything from start to finish has been really, painless. We really had a charmed existence within the space, I guess you could say. We just nothing but good things to say.
That's amazing. And I know you've mentioned a few of the audio dramas, but what are some of your favorite audio drama shows that you've listened to?
I would say one of my favorites. It's hard to say because there's so many of those shows that, any given day you'd ask me and I give you a different answer. But I'd say that one of my favorite is probably I Am in Askew. Just because I think John and I both have a great appreciation, I think. I mean, if I'm understanding the influences and whatnot behind the podcast, for Thomas Ligotti, and he is probably my favorite writer. And I Am in Askew so much just reminds me of that kind of writing, that kind of in-depth, almost surrealist quality. It was just a fantastic podcast, and I was in love with that podcast for a while. And there's been so many besides that. I mean, the Magnus Archives, Old Gods of Appalachia, and so on. Just a lot of the bigger shows that I was introduced to initially, I loved. But I'd say that my favorite of all was probably I Am in Askew, in terms of just, I love the writing. I just love the pacing, the atmosphere. It was really kind of the podcast I listened to after I'd got into Shepherd of Wolves and had already started writing it, because I wanted to write something. As I said before, the Shepherd of Wolves was kind of combining two other authors, one of them being Thomas Ligotti. And the reason I didn't kind of go full on kind of like surrealist, weird literature was because I didn't think there was any space for it. I didn't think anybody was doing anything like that, and I thought maybe there was a reason for that. Maybe it didn't go over real well. Now, if I had listened to I Am in Askew beforehand, I probably would have gone forward with my initial wants for something a little bit more surreal and weird fiction-y, because that's really what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until after I'd already started that I got a chance to listen to I Am in Askew, and I was like, oh, this is hugely popular, so this obviously goes over well with people. So that was kind of like bittersweet for me, because I loved it so much, and I was at the same time like, if I just heard this before, I would have been inspired to kind of go the direction I wanted to go in initially, because clearly there's an audience for this stuff, because this is, a huge podcast. It's very popular. Nice.
I know some of my favorite shows. I think for my favorite, it's tied between The White Vault, Old Gods of Appalachia, and one that's not horror based, is actually more comedy drama, and it's Midnight Burger.
Oh, right.
That one is definitely a good show. If you haven't checked it out, definitely would recommend. Now, I understand you've been in the audio drama for a few years now, and I wanted to ask you, because I know a lot of audience members sometimes ask me and ask other creators as well, what are some of the misconceptions about the audio drama world that people might have? Like, is everyone who makes them or does the voice acting super rich? Is it like super hard to create something and then put it on the computer for others to listen?
Well, I definitely, as far as the super rich aspect, not us. We do pretty well. We make enough to cover our expenses and things like that, but it's not a career level income or anything like that. But there are some other podcasts, obviously, they're doing very well, and they're definitely the sole focus of those folks is, that's their job. We hope to get there, but we're not quite there yet. As far as misconceptions go, I guess I want to say that when we got into it, one of the misconceptions, I guess, that we had was how, I guess, just how the process was so separate from the creative aspect. That was kind of like, and that just might be a generational thing. Like I said, I'm kind of one of the older dudes involved with this. So the technological aspect of it was a bit daunting for me. And like I said, everybody that's involved with it, Walker and Steven and I, were all, I'm the oldest of the three of us, but everyone else is in their 40s. So the easy part was the writing. The hard part was trying to wrap your head around the technical dimensions of it. And the biggest part, I would say, the hardest part is the marketing end. You really kind of have to get an understanding for how that all works. And, I think some people kind of think if the writing is there, that the people will show up. And it really, in many regards, at least as it applies to our experience, it's really about marketing, unfortunately. You've really got to have someone, well, for us, when we got into the network, marketing was kind of taken care of for us because we were on the network and Rusty Cole's taking care of all of that for us. But prior to that, we really didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to get things out in front of people. We didn't know how to, and still don't, we rely on other people for that. So I think that's probably the misconception a lot of people have. I've had a lot of people ask me, is it easy to get into in terms of if you have a really good story, does it just kind of take care of itself? And I wish it did, but it doesn't seem to. You can have the greatest story in the world, but if you can't market it, it's not going to show up in front of anybody. And you used to be able to kind of bypass that with social media. The algorithms were fairly merciful and you could get out in front of a lot of people, but now they've tightened up and become, far more selective about who they promote. And so even, having a big social media platform can be not enough. I mean, it's really become difficult just to kind of get out in front of people and to get the kind of viewership and the kind of eyes on your material that you're going to need. So I would say that's a big misconception. Like I said, just the idea that you will come into the space with a great writing chops and a great story and you'll just kind of expect to take off. And like I said, ideally it would work that way, but it really does require finessing at the level of marketing and so on. And like I said, we're no good at it. Like I said, we have other people that are kind of handling that for us, thank God, because if it was up to us any longer, I think, we would have sunk a long time ago.
Gotcha. And besides the marketing, what advice do you have for others who are wanting to go into the audio drama world?
I think, one of the best ways to approach it is to kind of prepare to be entering into kind of a collective, get to know everybody in that space. I don't know anybody that's just launched into it by themselves and done well. I think it's very much about building a community with other people in the space, helping each other out. Just being there and communicative and just knowing that there are other people out there and helping them whenever they need help. And hopefully they'll help you out when you find yourself in a bind. But that's really, it's our experience anyway, we really wouldn't have been able to do anything just with us going in and just trying to write and post and that sort of approach. It was really a collective social enterprise. We got to know some people, some really great people who helped us. And as we've kind of moved up the ladders, lots of people that we've met that we've helped. And I think that's one of the best ways to approach it is to really go in with a mind of you're going to have to network and you're going to have to make inroads and you're going to have to make connections. I don't want to make it sound, overly, how do I say, like
difficult?
Right. It's not difficult. It's just you have to go in with the mindset that you're not going to be able to do this by yourself. You definitely are going to have to make friends. You're definitely going to have to be in a kind of collective with other shows because you guys are all in it together. And nobody really stands apart in the sense that, we're not crossing over into each other's shows and promoting each other as we go along and helping each other as we go along. Because that's really one of the most, if not the most important part of all this. Like I said, marketing was a big deal, but you won't get to that level if you're not doing what you can to just be absorbed into the space. And there's a word I'm looking for, but I can't think about it. I'm just thinking networking, but just to, it's a cooperative effort.
Is it camaraderie?
Yeah, like a camaraderie with other shows and other people in the space, just to kind of get in there and welcome the help that you find and help the people that you find, and to make it a real group effort. That would be, to me, one of the biggest things that you need to engage, just because it is such a social enterprise. It is such a group effort at a certain level, that to try to go it alone, I mean, I suppose it's possible, but looking back on the road that we traveled, I couldn't see how it would have. I mean, I can only see it going badly if we just tried to remain unto ourselves and not talk to anybody else, and not really reach out to the community and so on.
That's awesome. And I definitely agree with networking and getting to know people. I mean, I definitely, when I was starting out, it was a guy called Lemon who does Audiostorium, who brought me into the Discord. And I was able to connect with different people, talk to them, and had the chance to do other fantastic interviews and network with them as well. So I definitely agree with anyone who's trying to get into the space. Networking, making friends is definitely our best bet. And who knows, maybe you'll be able to expand or join other people's shows and just enjoy the world of audio drama like everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the funnest parts of the whole thing, is just getting together and being able to share your work with other people and being involved in their projects and them being involved in yours. And it's very gratifying. In fact, when, it was just pretty much my brother and I doing voices for the longest time. And then later on, Kelly Baird joined with us. She's a fabulous voice actor. She's been with us for many years. And it was just kind of the four of us for a while. And then we did a call for voice actors, because we were thinking about doing a Damnation series part 2. And there's just so many, like as I said before, there's just so many characters there. There was only so many we could voice ourselves. And granted, we did previously, but now we kind of broadened our appeal, and we were a little bit more well known. So we thought we really should try to give this a wider representation, get more people in there to do the voices. And we did a call for action, and just people came out of nowhere that really were interested in the show and had been longtime fans. And, we just reached out to everybody, and it was fun. It was great meeting new people and bringing new people aboard. And it was amazing. And I think having people interested in your project that are coming from other shows, a lot of the voice actors that we have come from other shows. And, we know everybody. So it's just this big social experiment. It's been really fun and very gratifying.
That's amazing. And I'm happy to hear you guys are definitely expanding and definitely getting voice actors for different characters. So people can definitely distinguish between some of the characters. I think I remember listening to one show, and it's amazing how he does it. It's just one guy. Have you ever heard of a show called Malevolent?
Oh, right. Yeah. He's on the network. Yep.
Yeah. And it's just incredible.
Yeah, he does all the voices.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that until somebody told me, and I was like, no, stop. And I looked at the credits, and it's just him, and I'm like, oh my God, the dude is like Seth MacFarlane, or the dude who used to voice frickin' Bugs Bunny. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that we did a Halloween thing with Malevolent once. I think it was last year. I can't remember. My brother handles all these things, but when we found out he was doing all the voices, we're like, wow, that's pretty darn impressive. Like we do a lot of voices, but not the whole cast. We never tried, and just to be able to pull that off is an incredible accomplishment. It's just, like you said, Seth MacFarlane kind of comes to mind when I think about all the voices he does. He's just like a master of many voices. It's incredible.
All I know is if I'm locked in a room with him and he starts speaking through different voices, I'm out. I'm going to be running. He just does it so well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the I think interesting things about being involved in this, is just all the different people that you run into who can do such remarkable things, and especially the range of ability that some of the voice actors have. Like we just hired, like I said, I mentioned Kelly Baird, who's an incredible voice actor. She does voices for just about all the shows, and she does a whole bunch of different voices. And we just hired 3 more people on: Steven Zivick, Aubrey Ackers, and Sam Stark. And each one of them can do so many different voices, and it's not just voices, it's acting in and of itself, and they're phenomenal. In fact, now we're always saying that, Steven and I, who've been doing the voices for a while, are just kind of like we were placeholders until we could bring real actors on so that they could do the shows the proper justice, because I think we were just kind of doing what we could with what we had. We had a limited budget. It was just the two of us, and then later the three of us, but Walker didn't do too many voices or anything like that. And although he does he's actually got an acting background, so he is, of the three of us, the one that would probably do the best in that space, but he's a full-time editor, and there's just so much stuff going on. He could only contribute so much. So when we actually brought real voice actors on, starting with Kelly, it was kind of like, oh, we can kind of bring a degree of professionalism to the stories that was not there before. It was just the two of us doing it. And the actors that we have now are just incredible. They do such, like I said, not just voices, but their acting chops in general are so well developed and effective, and they just bring or breathe a whole new life into these series. And we couldn't be any more grateful for them coming aboard and doing what they do.
That's awesome, and that's super glad to hear. So lastly, what can people expect for the upcoming season of your show? Because I know you mentioned that you have a season 2 of one of your shows under the Maeltopia umbrella coming out. So what can people expect from that, if you can say anything at all?
We've got quite a list of shows that we want to bring out. I don't know exactly. I mean, we definitely have the Damnation Machine Series 2 that'll be out, the new horror show that I mentioned previously. And then... and this will sound ridiculous, I've probably got 12 more shows that I've outlined and that's just the tip of the iceberg. We just kind of, like I said, it's all I do. So I like to come up with different ideas and then outline them to a certain extent, and then just kind of set them aside. So when the time comes that we want to do something different, I have something just sitting there. But immediately coming up would be the Damnation Machine Series 2, the new horror show that I spoke of. The sleep-wake cycle, I'm not sure we're going to be doing that for a season 4. We might be doing something slightly different for that. We've yet to really discuss the ins and outs of it. I don't plot things so completely that I know where they're going. I just kind of do it in the moment. So with the sleep-wake cycle, it's kind of like they kind of have to stop me. Like, Mark, you have to end you're like in episode 100 or something. You kind of have to, you got to cut it off. So I just keep writing until somebody tells me to stop, and then I kind of wrap things up. So I don't know exactly where it's going to go. If season 4 will be required, or if we'll do something slightly different that is still under the umbrella of the sleep-wake cycle. But it's entirely possible to be a series or a season 4. And then we have, I think we have another show coming out. I have one that I was thinking about, or had been thinking about for a while, and I mothballed it. So there's quite a bit on the horizon.
That's amazing to hear, and I'm super glad that you have all these shows coming.
Thank you.
And I definitely know your audience and your Patreon are going to be super happy and have all this stuff to look forward to.
Yeah, that's been probably the greatest thing is to have found an audience, and there are just so many people that are out there listening, and they touch base with us and let us know how we're doing, and it's really been wild and extremely gratifying that, one, that you're doing something you enjoy, and then 2, that it's something other people enjoy. And that's kind of the best part of the whole thing.
Well, that's good. I'm super glad, because I know if I didn't enjoy what I did, I definitely wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the fun things about this kind of work is it barely qualifies as a job. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but at the end of the day, it's something you really enjoy. So it's kind of hard to say, I don't want to do this today because I have to, it's work. And it really isn't in a lot of regards. There's, like I said, I don't want to shortchange the actual hard work, and there is a lot of it that goes into this stuff. But, at the end of the day, it's fun, it's fulfilling, it's gratifying. It's your own, it's something that you've done, and it's something that is being appreciated by other people. And so it's a far cry from, something I lament doing, like a regular, I'll just call it a regular job where you kind of have to go and do something you're probably not that into. So this has really been a real blessing, a real privilege for us.
Well, that's super glad to hear. Well, everybody, that was our interview with Mark from Maeltopia. Mark, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Like I said, it's an honor and a privilege to talk to such a huge horror icon from the audio drama world.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate having me on. I don't know if I'm an icon, but I definitely I appreciate the opportunity to come on. I love the show and had a great time. I appreciate the heck out of it.
Well, I definitely appreciate you saying that. Well, everybody, I'll see you guys next week for another fun episode. Sayonara, see you later, and have a blessed one. Goodbye.